Yeah, looking kind of wilty. Okay. There, you're all set for your debut appearance. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Voodoo Garden. My name is Ray. I will be your host today. I had a request. I have a lot of requests, but one plant that I haven't shown in a while, it's called a voodoo lily. And a viewer sent me some bulbs, and they're of a weird variety. Actually, this one is called Sarumatum, or Matur. I can't read the writing. Sarumatum! Sounds like I'm casting a spell. Venusum. And this is what's called a voodoo lily. And I thought, wow, how appropriate is that for a place I call the Voodoo Garden? And the reason I call it the Voodoo Garden isn't because it's black magic or any kind of weird stuff. It's just that the things that can happen in here are a little extraordinary sometimes. And that's why I got the name voodoo. It has nothing to do with dark magic or anything stupid like that. But this is what's called a voodoo lily, and I don't know where to put this, so hold on to this. I wanted to show you this because this is supposed to be an extraordinary plant. What it does is you plant the bulb, and it's a pretty big size bulb. It looks like a claw. No, it's about the size of a golf ball or a little bit bigger. And you plant the bulb, and like most bulbs, it'll start sending up growth right away because bulbs have their energy stored inside the bulb. It's like a little energy ball. And when you plant it, it takes the moisture, it keys it into starting to grow, and then it'll start putting down roots, and then it uses all the energy in that bulb to send out either flowers or growth. And then after it expends that energy, it relies on leaves and its roots to replenish that bulb and to either regrow it or grow more bulbs. That's basically my understanding. I don't know what that is, but that's my understanding of how plants work, and it works well enough for me. Now, take a look at the leaves on this. This is what I found really kind of odd. Here, there, take a look at this. This is a typical leaf, and I don't know if this is what the leaf is supposed to look like because I really have no idea how to grow this. I didn't look it up and get all kinds of information. I just kind of winged it and threw the bulb in there and hoped it would grow. So I don't know if this is normal for the leaves or if they're supposed to be bigger or not. Wrinkly, don't know. But it put out a little leaf, and then it put out another little lobe of a leaf, then another lobe, and it just keeps putting out these weird lobes. And yeah, so that's what the leaves look like. Kind of odd looking. I've never seen a leaf do this. It just kind of sends out a little stem over here and sends out more side leaves, but it's all on one leaf stem. And the stalk is actually quite beautiful. It has spots on it like a giraffe's neck. Yep, this one leaning over here. I don't know why it's leaning like that. And it's not because I didn't water it, because I water it properly. I give it a good solid soaking, then I let it slightly dry out, then I do it again. But it's a weird looking little plant, isn't it? Go down to the base and take a look at what's coming on down here. Right here in the center, it has this weird pokey looking thing, like a finger. Yeah, and that's coming out of the top of the bulb. But what's really strange, and what's really weird about this, is that it's not growing. It grew up this tall and it stopped. And it makes me wonder what's going on here. But from the side of the bulb, because the bulb isn't this big, it isn't, you know, these aren't coming from the top of the bulb. What I think happened is it sent out little shoots and it started forming these things coming up, the stems with the leaves. But look, at the base of this, there's a new one coming out. And from the base of this, another new one's coming out. Same thing right here. So it's kind of like these are almost like separate plants. Separate, 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 separate. Kind of weird, isn't it? It's like a little ring of plants coming out of the main bulb. And I don't know if these will form their own bulbs or not. Like I said, I'm winging it. Don't know what I'm doing, but the plant seems to be having a good time. I'm wondering if this center thing, as soon as these leaves develop enough energy for the plant, if possibly this will eventually spur into growing and turn into the flower. I don't know. What do you think? You're a weird one, Mr. Voodoo. Yeah, it is kind of strange, isn't it? I love things that are a little bit different. So let's set that one to the side. I wanted to show you something else. Well, first of all, take a look. Tobacco. That thing got huge. And it's getting bigger by the minute. I'm not saying by the day. I'm saying by the minute because this thing just grows and grows and grows. But, not hiding this, but this I'm going to have to prune. And I know everybody always says, Ray, you prune everything. Why are you always snipping the heads off of stuff? I got this Lizzie Borden thing. I just got to chop things up. But the reason I'm going to be pruning this, I mean, the reason that I prune peppers and tomatoes is to force the growth and to get better production. But since I'm not looking to get production out of this, the reason that I'm going to prune this is because this will literally hit the ceiling. And the last thing I need is for this plant to hit the ceiling, because then where are you going to go from there? So what I do, and I've done this before when I lived at my previous house, is I snipped it off. And this, of all plants that I've grown, the tobacco, really responds well to being pruned because it has new shoots on every single leaf node, and those shoots aren't just for show. They will actually grow like mad, and it'll turn into this weird, it looks kind of like have you ever grown Jerusalem artichokes or sunchokes? I grow those outside, and those ones form multiple stems coming out of the side, and it's actually quite beautiful. And what this will do is it'll send out a lot of side shoots, but not really that long, and it'll have flowers on the ends of them. So what I want to do is I want to have this be approximately 4 feet tall and a lot wider, because I have a lot of soil invested in this. So I don't want just one little stem going to the top, because then it's moving like this, and I really don't need that. I don't like vertical. I kind of always liked horizontal, you know, like a nice spread on a tree or a bush or a vine. I always like to get the maximum side growth out of it, and also this will sturdy the stalk. So I know you're not going to like this, but aha, down you go. Well, I can't feed this to the worms because I really don't know if I can feed this to my grubs. It's tobacco, and so tobacco has nicotine in it, from my understanding. So nicotine sulfate kills insects, so maybe I'll just throw this outside. Okay, well, that's done. I know that looks kind of sad, but it has to be done. Tough love in the voodoo garden. And this, I know it's not very remarkable as it is now, but for those of you that have been tuning in recently, you know that I had this problem with my soil, and I got so sick of seeing this dead looking thing that I chopped it down to soil level, and there was nothing but this little nub of a stalk. That's all there was. And I changed the soil. I yanked it out of there, trimmed the roots, shook off all the soil, repotted it in brand new potting soil, and this is what happened. It started coming back. The first leaf was kind of icky, and the next leaf was better, the next leaf was better, and it is beautiful. By the way, this is called a blood banana, or a Zabrina banana. It's a beauty, and this was such a showstopper that's what really caused me some pain, is that I featured this in one video at my former place, and I literally had to drag it across the room. I couldn't even pick it up. It was so huge. The leaves were so big. It was just insane. And I got it when it was, I don't know, about maybe this tall. This is how big it was when I bought it off a seller on eBay. It was just a little slip of a plant, and I put it in soil, and I thought it was going to die. Nope. And so I'm kind of partial to this thing. I like it, and I wanted to keep it alive. I wanted to show you guys, because this is going to be a permanent, boy, that's a lot of soil in there. This is going to be a permanent feature in the voodoo garden, and I don't know what's going to happen when it gets bigger, but I love that. And by the way, banana leaves are edible. And so my worms do love these. I notice it when I tear up the banana leaves and throw it in with my grubs. Those are those rhinoceros beetle grubs. For those of you who are new, I have these huge grubs, and they're really disgusting. And I feed them plant material. Oh, wow. You know, when you tear up a banana leaf, it tastes like, I mean, it smells like banana. I know that sounds like, wow, Ray, that's not rocket science. But you never really think about it. Like if you tear up a pepper leaf. Doesn't smell like peppers. Tomato leaves don't taste like tomatoes. They smell like tomato leaves. This actually smells like a fresh banana, you know, like when you peel a banana. Kind of cool. And I wanted to give you guys a little bit more advice, because I gave you some advice on the last, I think it was the last couple of videos. And those programs are designed to help you in your garden, because this is gardening season. I know this is an indoor gardening channel, but a lot of these plants that I have growing in here, like this little kitty, these are destined to go outside. So I want to give you some advice on these. This is what's called Prunus Cherry tomato. And let me tell you a real quick history. You're going to like this. Okay, back about maybe 6 years ago, I bought a hybrid cherry tomato. It was called a Husky Cherry Red tomato plant. And I wanted a low-growing bushy plant. And I did a video on that. And I grew this outside in my garden. And it only got like about 2.5 feet tall. And it was really wide and sturdy, and it produced a boatload of cherry tomatoes that were sweet and delicious. And the plant was really low, and I was slapping it back and forth and having a good time. And I liked the plant, so I saved the seeds, and I grew those. And I saved the seeds from that, and I grew those. And I kept saving the seeds and growing them, saving the seeds and growing them. And this tomato plant has done so well. It has been featured. It's actually a star on my channel. I did grow a tomato plant indoors for the winter, for people who are going stir crazy in the winter. I showed a video of how you could just grow it by the window and get fresh tomatoes. And I was eating tomatoes off my plant in the middle of winter when it was sub-zero in Minnesota. And I showed how this plant, I saved the seeds and grew it, saved the seeds and grew it, and I took the genetics from this hybrid plant and I turned it back into what it was originally, what one of the parents was originally. Because when you have a hybrid plant, what it is the pollen from one plant pollinates another plant, and then you get a crossbreed, kind of like you and your parents. Your mom and dad are not related. Most of ours aren't. And, sorry, they come together and they make a child, you. And so you are actually a hybrid of them. You're half your mother and half your dad. And that's exactly the same thinking when it comes to plants. This is half its mother and half its father. Now, its father may have been a tall, lanky plant, and its mother might have been this short, squat little plant. Who knows? But the reason for hybrids is because somebody wants to grow a plant that has certain characteristics. And this one was grown for low, stocky plant that put out a lot of fruit. So maybe one of the parents had a lot of fruit and the other one didn't have a lot of fruit, but it was stocky. So they put them together and they got good genetics. And it's kind of like rolling the dice, because you could have gotten a tall, lanky plant that had no fruit, you know. So that's how genetics goes. I learned this in high school. So this was a good plant, and so I saved the seeds. But the weirdest thing happened. It didn't stay a short, stocky plant. It reverted back to one of its parents, which was a long, growing, indeterminate, because bush cherry reds are determinate. And well, I guess one of the parents was an indeterminate, because it grew, and I have an episode on this, where I grew this plant to be 13.5 feet tall, indoors. Pause for effect. Yes, 13.5 feet tall indoors, and it was going up to the ceiling, which was only, I think, a 9-foot tall ceiling, and then across my ceiling. And it was dripping with tomatoes. So this plant has shown itself, and I can tell you anything I want, and you can believe it or not, but you know, when you actually see the video evidence of this plant growing indoors and me standing next to it, and I have to stand on a chair to actually harvest the tomatoes, and it's being grown indoors, that is something to brag about. That's something, you know, good genetics. Anybody can actually water it, give it the light and stuff, so I can't take a lot of credit. But the genetics on this were really good. So I reverted it back to an heirloom, and I know some people don't go for that. They say, oh no, an heirloom has to be bred for so many years. I don't think so. That's just my point of view. And so this has been a solid staple, and its growth and production has not changed. So I believe it's done reverting back. So I grow this, and I save the seeds, and I give them to friends every now and then, because people seem to like this. And I renamed it the Prunus Cherry. I know I'm stealing, I'm taking a plant and naming it after myself, but I didn't do that. Somebody actually called it the Prunus Cherry, and the name kind of stuck. And that's because it's no longer what its parents were, and I don't know what the two plants were that came together, so I can't really give it the proper name. So I call this the Prunus Cherry. And I'm showing you this not to brag about the plant, but I planted the seed in a little tiny clear plastic cup with no holes on the bottom. And I tell you, I don't cut holes in it because I want to water and I don't want it dripping through. And the clear plastic cups, you can actually see how you water. And also, once you see the roots forming around the outside, you want to transplant it, because with the light, sometimes it will harm the roots. The next step is a cup this size, okay? So I go from a small cup to a cup about maybe 4 times its size, 5 times its size. And these don't have clear on them. They're red, and they have no holes on the bottom, and I transplant it into that. Now that's how I transplant. Whenever the plant gets about as tall as the cup, it's time to transplant. That's what I did with this one. So there, prop's done. I put it into this, and then I want to show you the next step, because I'm going to be transplanting this. You might think, okay, Ray, let's put it into this pot, right? Well, the problem with that is the bulk of the roots on a tomato plant are at the bottom. Even though I planted this deep and I filled it up with soil to make sure that the stem puts out roots, the bulk of the roots are always going to be around the base of the plant. So if I put this in this container, look, yeah, it's actually right to the top. So the bottom roots aren't going to be able to go any deeper. And that's what we want, is we want the roots to spread out and go down. If I put this in there like that, the roots are still going to stay clustered up and still stay clustered around the bottom, and that's not going to be healthy for the plant. If I plant it any higher, it's going to look ridiculous. So this pot will not work. Even though it's wide enough, it's not deep enough. So this will not work. That's why I wanted to show you this, is that even though the pot is bigger, it has to actually be deeper. You know, it would actually be a wonderful pot, but I'd never be able to get the plant out. This, I found this for $1, I think, at a thrift store. I think it's $1, $2. It's a clay pot. Can you imagine this thing in there? How deep those roots would get? That would be insane. but I don't plant anything in this. I use this for a stand to put my plants on to get them up off the table. But what I'm going to be doing with this one is I'm going to be putting it into a pot this big. And this pot is deep. This is a pot that you get at any nursery, and it has holes in the bottom. So you have to put a tray underneath it. Otherwise, water just leaches out. Because look, see? If I bring this almost to the top, it'll give the bottom roots room to grow down, and that's what I want. I could plant it deep and get more roots along the stem, but I've already done that once here, so I got enough going on the stem right now. I'm going to plant this one right up towards the surface, and that'll give the bottom roots a chance. You want to alternate. You want to give the bottom roots a chance and then bury it deep and let the stem grow roots. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plant it up here, let the bottom roots grow, and then by the time this plant outpaces this pot, it's going to be time to plant it outside. And then I'll have by the time I plant this outside, mark my words, this plant is going to be about maybe this tall. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bury it deep and put the stem underneath the ground. And that way, the bulk of the roots at the bottom will be way down deep. Like I tell you outside on the Praxis channel, how to plant your tomatoes deep so that the roots are way down and they don't dry out and your plants produce a lot better. And then the stem's going to be buried, and that will grow roots towards the surface, so I can take surface minerals. The surface roots take more minerals, the lower roots take more water. That's how it works. Okay, so that's how I'm going to do it. So in order to get this pot, because I don't have any more pots, I ran out of pots. Can you believe it? I grow for a living and I ran out of pots. And so I need this pot. And this pepper has also outpaced the pot. Look at this pepper plant. Take a look at this. I love this plant. I gotta admit, this is a beauty. This is a sweet pepper plant sent to me by a little gardener. Well, I call him a little gardener. He probably doesn't like that. Kids don't like to be called kids. But he's a young gardener, and his name is David Chupp. And he's a good friend of mine on Facebook. He sent me some moldy peppers. He didn't mean to send me moldy peppers. They just molded. Those of you who have been following this, you know what I've been talking about. I call him Little Chupp Dude. And Little Chupp Dude sent me these peppers, and I planted the seeds. And I got to admit, this is one of the most beautiful pepper plants I've ever grown. And I'm going to be transplanting this into another pot so that I can have this pot. This is going to be fun. This, by the way, this pepper plant is not going outside. This plant is destined to be an indoor plant because I want to grow a pepper plant indoors. I love growing pepper plants, and I love growing tomatoes. Those are my two favorites. I got to say, if I had to pick plants that are my favorite to grow, tomatoes and peppers. Tomatoes are my favorite to grow outdoors. I don't really enjoy growing them indoors as much as I enjoy growing peppers indoors, because tomatoes, they go crazy. And you know, if you look the other way, they'll get lanky all of a sudden. Peppers are a lot easier to control. And so I want to grow one indoors. I used to have the scorpion and the boot jolokia indoors, and I don't have those anymore. So I want an indoor one. And it turns out, Little Chupp pepper, this is going to be a prime candidate to grow indoors. I have a feeling, and my feelings are generally right whenever I go with my gut. And I got a feeling this is going to be a beauty. It's flowering, it's growing, and it's producing peppers all at the same time. Usually they do one or the other, and they can't figure out what they want to do. This one is doing both. So I'm going to put this in my 16-inch pot. That's the largest pot I have. And I'm not going to bury it deep because the fork in the plant, if you watched a previous episode on this, it's right at soil level. So I don't want to put that underneath the ground. I want to put that right at soil level. So this is going to have an ungodly amount of space for the roots. And it's really easy to do. I took one of my plants. This is a lime. Ooh, that was a fungus net. I don't like those fungus nets. Anyway, this was my some kind of weird lime that wasn't doing that good. So I yanked it out, threw it outside, and I dug a hole in here. And let's put this thing in. Now, before I do this, I want to mention that I did start this the same as I did every other plant. Small cup until I saw roots around the side. Then I transplanted it into a cup here. And then it went into this pot. Now, it went into this pot only, I think, 2 weeks ago. Yeah, and it was about half this size. It has gone nuts since it's been in here. Part of it has to do with the soil. Part of it has to do with the pot size. And part of it has to do with the genetics. Look at this. In just a couple weeks, see the perfect root formation all around the sides, all around the bottom. This is exactly what you want to see when it comes to transplanting, how much roots it has. Not too many, not too few. If you only have just a couple here, you probably transplanted a little bit too soon. If you have a whole wall of them, you waited too long. So, and by waiting too long, generally if you have a root mass, it's hard for the roots to break out of that. So anyway, shake the dirt off. Turn this thing over, and when you're transplanting, you want to do it quickly. You don't want these roots sitting out in the air any longer than they absolutely have to. Right in the center. Now, when you're transplanting, don't worry at all about a little dirt on the leaves. It's not going to hurt. Come on, they grow in dirt. A little bit here. A bit there. Now, anytime you transplant any plant, well, pretty much any plant, I can't speak for every plant because not every plant requires the same thing, but most plants, you want to make sure that the original root ball is a little bit below soil level. Now, sometimes, like things with tomatoes, if we want to bury them super deep, that rule doesn't apply because we want to go way down below the soil level. And some plants, you can't bury them any deeper. I don't know what those plants are. I haven't run across one of those yet, but this one is right at soil level, just a little bit below, and we don't press it down that hard, and there we go. This plant will live out its life forever in this pot. It will never leave this pot. And if I take good care of the soil, this is the potting mix that I mixed in my fungus gnat predators, the hypoasis mites. So there are fungus gnat mites in here. So even if one of my random fungus gnats that are in my grow room get in here, all it's going to do is it's going to feed those predatory mites, and it's just going to make them even better and better. That's the cool thing. I know I like to find a good side of any situation. And with those fungus gnats in here, yeah, it's inconvenient, but they're not really hurting my plants because the fungus gnat predators are keeping them in check. And it's feeding the fungus gnat predators so they can make more babies, and in the long run, I'll win the battle. I mean, it's just a matter of time before the fungus gnats run out. And these fungus gnat predators, they will live on decomposing plant matter. And the decomposing plant matter is when I take the leaves and I crush them up and put them on the soil. That will feed them until the next infestation. So they're just an army in waiting. And I like that. Anyway, I'm going to give this some water and call it a day for transplanting. Well, I kind of forgot that I'm transplanting my tomato. Here I am ready to end the program, and I forgot. Well, the main reason I was going to do some transplanting is to get this pot ready so that I can plant the Prunus Cherry. And by the way, this pot is such a weenie. Look at that. It's just fallen apart, but it's generally, these pots that you get from nurseries, generally they're only one-shot pots. You know, you'll buy a plant in it, and they assume you're going to take this, plant it in your garden or something, and then throw the pot away. And I'm not a huge environmentalist, but you know, that is just nuts, because this is going to take a kabillion years to break down in landfills, if it ever does. Or if you try to take it to recyclers. Generally, they don't take these kind of pots. I found out that. And so what are you going to do with those? I mean, you can only hide them in the basement for so long. So I like to reuse them whenever I can. So I have a whole closet full of pots. And I try to reuse them as much as possible, and as time goes on, they eventually start decomposing and breaking, like these cups. I use them for years, and then eventually you grab the cup and it just goes crunch. That's when you know you've used them a long time. But at least I got years worth of use out of the plastic instead of just one day. Okay, flip it upside down like I showed you. And voila, look at that. Nice and loose at the bottom. I'm not even going to mess with these. Beautiful root structure. Take a look at that. It's got a few roots coming out of the side. That's from the stem. The main cluster is at the base. That's exactly what I told you what was going on. Now, like I said, we're not going to plant this deep. We're going to plant it close to the top. And then when we take it out to the garden, we'll plant it deep. And that will give us even more stem roots. And the more roots you have, the healthier the plant. The healthier the plant, the better the production. Yep. I know it sounds like a weird little mantra, but you know what? That simple little mantra works in my simple little garden. Toss this in, toss this in. And you know, that's such a fun part of my growing. I love transplanting. You know, I've said that before, and I'll say it again, and I'll keep saying it. Oops. By the way, any leaf that's going to be underneath the soil, take it out. Yeah, it's worm food. If I had a worm farm, that would be worm food. I don't. I have a grub farm. And those grubs are making grub castings, kind of like worm castings, and those worm castings that they're making are feeding the predatory mites that I have in there. I'm growing predatory mites in there, and then I put those into my potting soil. And so it's a really great situation I got going here with one thing helping the other thing. Ta-da! That's all it is. Now, some people will have plants where the stems, see how this is kind of bent over just a little bit? That's because the lights are on all sides of it. But generally, if you have the lights right above it and your stems are kind of doing this thing, what that usually means is if you've just transplanted them, it's going through a little bit of a shock period. You don't have to worry about it. Just leave it alone. Quit pampering it, because whenever people see their plants start doing stuff, they're like, what do I do? Water it, water it, water it, water it, water it. No, stop. Go sit down for a minute, okay? You just need to back off. Give it time to adjust. Everything goes through a shock. When you move to a new town, you go through a little shock. When you get a new dog, they go through a little bit of a shock. You know, everything needs an adjustment period, and plants are no different. So that's why I say when you transplant, don't go throwing them underneath the bright light and stuff and expecting them to just take off like a greyhound. They're not going to do that. Their roots have to get used to this, because when you take the roots out, they're exposed to air. That's not a natural thing for plants, okay? So you want to just make sure that when you transplant them, you water them well, set them to the side, don't give them too much light for a couple days, and then let them rest, and then put them back into the situation that they're growing in. That's all you got to do. And I'm not saying that you'll always have success that way, but it's the best method for success. Little weird sticks in here. I was using some sticks to hold this little zucchini plant up. This is a little zucchini that I showed you about pollinating and stuff, and I had a good time growing it, and it's just kind of wobbly, but certain things that are grown indoors generally don't do as well as they do outdoors. Zucchini is one of them. Zucchini, I know if I grew this outdoors, I'd have a beautiful plant. And it's okay, it's fun, but I had my fun with it. I'm done with it, so I'm going to take it out. I know some of you people just hate seeing plants die, but wow, look at the root system on that. Way down there. Yep. That is a healthy little plant. But this is not going to waste. Everything has a second life in this garden. And what I'm going to be doing with this is I'm going to be taking, beating the heck out of it. Oh. It does smell good though. It smells like spring. I'm going to take this and chop it up. And by the way, that little zucchini that I pollinated, it got blossom end rot. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe there's a calcium deficiency. Who knows? Oh, it smells good though. It smells like a little zucchini. I'm going to chop this up and I'm going to feed it to my grubs. Like I say, I got to keep those grubs fed, because those grubs are making the poo, and the poo is feeding the mites, and the mites are keeping my garden healthy. Everybody's busy here in the voodoo garden. Okay, I think I'm done. But the reason I wanted to do that is because its time was over. But also, like I said, I have a shortage of pots. This is my 10-inch, I think it's a 10-inch or 12-inch pot. This is very valuable. This is very valuable real estate in here. And I have a lot more things to be transplanting today, and I need this pot. Because these little ones, they're good, but some plants need a little bit more root space. And I have a pepper plant that needs transplanting, and this is exactly what it needs. So I have to kind of weigh like who's going to live and who's going to die here. But you know, no sad songs for the zucchini. We had a good time. We had a good run, but it's going to go and do something good for the garden, and that's what I like. It's kind of like reusing my pots and not polluting the world. I can reuse this vegetation and turn it into something good even though it died. All right, I think I'm pretty much done. Done preaching, done transplanting. Thanks for joining me in the Voodoo Garden, everybody. Until next time, this is Ray. I'm out of here.